Everyone, at this time, I'd like to call the meeting of Monday, September 8th to order at 7:05. All members are present. We'd like to start off by the transmitting of Treasury warrants 9, 9A, 10, 10A, 11, and 11A. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. At this time, I'd like to take up the approval of the minutes for January 27, 2014, March 10th, 2014, May 27, 2014, and June 9, 2014. Do I have a motion?
Move to approve all four sets of minutes as read.
Motion's been made. Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. Moving along to our 7 o'clock appointment with William Holt, the Assistant Town Engineer, with reference to Kinder Morgan Pipeline update. Welcome.
Thank you. My name is William Holt, and with me tonight is Paula Looney, who's the new town engineer.
Nice to meet you all.
David.
I was asked to come tonight to basically review the status of the Kinder Morgan pipeline application proposal, and in particularly the lots that it affects in Wilmington. On the screen, we have the northern section of Wilmington, and you can see over on the North Reading side, the black line is indicating the actual path, or the proposed path, of the Kinder Morgan pipeline. It comes in from the east, from North Reading, traverses through Wilmington, and exits out into Andover. I'm going to zoom in to the individual parcels as we go along the pipeline, and I'll explain to you which parcels are being affected. So, right here we have North Reading town line, and there's several parcels right through this area, 101.1, 101.11, 102.51. These are all, the shaded parcels are all town-owned parcels.
Bill, can you just orient us in terms of what street we're near at this point?
Sure. Zoom out a little bit. Okay, this is Salem Street right here, Route 62. And this is the old railroad bed. It goes to Wilmington. Thrush Road's here, Charlotte Road, development down through here. Zoom out a little bit more, you can kind of see where 93, 62. So we're in the easterly side of, northeasterly side of Wilmington. And North Reading's right here. So what we've done is we've highlighted all the parcels that are owned by the town, which all the shaded parcels are owned by the town. So it's traversing through these large parcels that are owned by the town, portions of which will have wetlands associated with them. I talked to Winifred, and each individual lot would have to be looked at, and it'll have to be applied for through the conservation to get permits to go through those parcels. A particular concern is this parcel here, which is a conservation land parcel. Although it's not traversing through this parcel, 121.3, that is a parcel that's owned by the water department, and this is the Salem Street well, located right here. So it's within probably 400 feet of the proposed pipeline, which is just outside of the Zone 1 to a public well. I'm going to turn on one more layer. See if I can find it. All of the crosshatch area, which is the entire, all these parcels, is now in the Zone 2 of the town wells. So the entire length of pipeline through the town parcels here will be in the Zone 2 of the public wells. This is again, the Salem Street well, and as we move along, we'll cross Route 62, again through town parcels, and then we enter into the old railroad bed, so they'll be traversing along the railroad bed. It'll go by a couple of residential properties, but it won't be located within those properties' boundaries. This is the Winchester Medical Center. And it goes back into again to a town parcel, which is still in the railroad bed right away. And then we go by again. The next well is the Browning Fields well, which is pretty close, as you can see, as it traverses past that. This is the old railroad bed, so it goes along the old railroad bed, crosses Andover Street, right here, and then this is Old Salem Street, and Ainsworth Road, they call it. And then it jumps back into some public land again, some town-owned water properties. This is the water treatment facility right here. It's the water department offices.
Administrative offices.
The actual treatment, this is raw water that's being drawn out of these wells, and sorry, can't seem to get the water line pulled up there. Can't see it. Can you see that? Can't find the other.
Go to the right. And then it's down in that shaded area, right?
This one right here.
A little further down, but the general area, yeah.
This is where the actual water treatment facility is, right?
Correct, the Sargent treatment
and
facility.
And the raw water gets drawn down into this facility for treatment and then distribution. So as we keep going northeast and northwest, we go into some private property. These are all commercial properties here. There's 21 total properties that's affected by the pipeline, of which 8 are town-owned. They're all vacant. All the town-owned properties are vacant. 2 of them are conservation, under the Conservation Commission's jurisdiction, and it's all residential zoning, although it's all vacant land. The other 13 properties are all commercial industrial properties, of which 4 of them have buildings on them and are being used, and the other 9 are vacant land, but they're all commercial properties. So as it goes through these commercial properties here, up crosses Route 125. This is obviously a commercial property that's got a building on it. So we'll go down the property line, go along the backside of a couple of these smaller properties here. These are all commercial as well. And then it goes through, this is the Charles River Labs. So it's going to the Charles River Lab. I believe that also has a easement for New England Power through it. I think that's following the New England Power easement. Again, a vacant property, commercial property. And we go up to some more conservation town land right here, this large parcel here, which is, and then there's a few more commercial that are vacant properties. New England Power owns this property and this property as well. And then it exits into North Andover, crossing Ballardville and exits into North Andover. So that's the route it takes. Again, it's 21 properties, 13 are commercial, privately owned, and 8 are town-owned properties, going by both of those town wells as well. About a third of it's through the old railroad bed, traverses the old railroad bed, so which is a desired corridor for the pipeline. I mean, that's what we hope to put it in, something like that, where it's less impact to private lands. Now, the coalition, of course, is it's not stated as 100% opposition, but their mission is to provide knowledge and to work collaboratively to provide representation and information to relevant government and public bodies concerning the Tennessee Gas Pipeline project proposed by Kinder Morgan. The underlying tone of the coalition is to oppose the pipeline, and to that end, they're trying to perform studies to determine if there's a need for the power line. I mean, for the gas line, and they're having a study made up in the New England sorry, my notes. A lot of acronyms.
This.
Yep, the Northeast Municipal. No, that's Northeast Municipal Gas Pipeline Coalition is the coalition that I'm attending. The New England State Commission on Electricity is set up by the 6 New England governors. They're also doing a study on whether or not the pipeline is needed. that was basically brought on by the grassroots movement and the coalition movement to get the governors to reconsider this Kinder Morgan pipeline. The process that the Kinder Morgan has to go through is to apply to the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, which they're about to do. They're poised to do that on September 15th. They're going to do a pre-filing submission, which gets them in the door and starts the process of public meetings with town throughout the route of the pipeline with various towns. That's an input process where they try to determine the impact on the environment. When they say the environment, they mean both economic impact to the communities and the social impact to the communities, as well as the environmental impact. So it's multiple areas that they're looking at to determine what the impact will be. And the coalition is hoping to be able to show that the impact is significant for this particular pipeline. Now, we only have a lateral, it's called a Linfield lateral, which is a 16 to 22-inch pipe going through this proposed location, and whereas a lot of the other towns have the 36-inch main. The 36-inch main will allow 2.2 billion cubic feet per day of volume through it. The anticipated need for New England is about 1 billion in 20 years, 1 billion additional volume over the next 20 years. So there's 1.2 billion cubic feet that's excess volume, quantity that's going to be most likely, in the opinion of the coalition, it's going to be exported to Canada and then overseas, where the price for the natural gas is higher and commands a higher price. So there's a lot of extra gas proposed in this proposed pipeline that's not going to be used in New England, and that's one of the concerns the coalition has, and they're trying to provide that information to the various government bodies to help them reconsider this Kinder Morgan pipeline and whether we need it. Looking at alternative energies, sources, which I think I've outlined in a couple of different memos to you. Some of those, wind power, solar power, are rather expensive and not really a viable option. The coalition has taken a position that there's only 10 days within the year that exceed the peak demand where we don't have enough energy, enough gas or electricity to supply the homes in the area. And so the question is the demand, those 10 days, does that warrant building the Kinder Morgan pipeline? And of course the coalition's opinion is it is not. And there's also other alternatives. There's Spectra Energy is proposing another pipeline within its existing right-of-way corridors. They're further along in the process with FERC. They've already applied and have had some hearings for 350 million cubic feet per day increase over the next, that's what they're proposing right now, within their existing corridor. And they can increase that to 1 billion over the next 10 to 15 years to meet the demand that's needed. So again, the coalition is hoping that the government will look at the alternative of using that potential pipeline as opposed to building a whole new pipeline, the Kinder Morgan pipeline, which will affect have a lot more environmental impact. The Spectra pipeline wouldn't have as much environmental impact because it's using the existing corridor, which is already in place. Essentially, that's kind of where we're at. There's been other discussions on various ways of fighting the Kinder Morgan pipeline, preventing surveys to be had and things like that. I mean, that's something that we can provide information for if the selectmen would like to see that. But it's more some of the more affected towns are more involved in trying to prevent the Kinder Morgan pipeline from happening. I don't know if you have anything to add from the meeting today. If you have any questions that I'll try to answer.
Yeah, no, I think you hit it. All the points.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate the update. At this time, I'm going to open it up to the board. Does anyone have any questions at all?
I'll start. I guess
more a comment and maybe a request directed to the manager is that, well, let me back up a step, actually, Bill. I'll make sure I got it right. 8 town-owned properties through which the proposed pipeline would go, 2 of which are under the care, custody, and control of the Conservation Commission. There's 13 commercial or industrial properties that it's going through. Did I catch 4 developed and 9 undeveloped?
Correct.
Okay. So I guess, based on that information, if we could ask the manager to, as this plan unfolds, to get a better sense of the impact on the adjacent town facilities that Bill had mentioned, the different wells that were mentioned that it was going by. And then also, if we could get some sense of whether or not it has an economic impact in terms of the potential build-out of any of these properties, both from the town side or in the private sector. And my instincts tell me that they take that into account because they don't want to have to be, incurring expensive land takings and things of that nature. But seems to me that we ought to be comfortable with what the more microeconomic impact might be. And then in terms of kind of the macroeconomic impact, that's where I really, this is out of my league. I can't get my head around the bigger picture economics other than the things that make common sense to me, like like the more available gas, the lower the price should be for the end users at the end of the day. But I mean, other than general economic principles, it'd be nice to have some guidance from, I don't know if the MMA or other regional agencies might have that kind of analysis at their disposal without reinventing the wheel might be very helpful. And it's no disrespect to the coalition or to Bill or any of the other members, but certainly as it's currently comprised, that the coalition seems to be taking a position that we would have expected. And I want to make sure we have both sides of the argument in that respect. So, so if we could get some of that information and get hopefully get a better level of comfort as to what it means in the big picture and to Wilmington, that'd be helpful, because a lot of this stuff, I get it, but when I walk out of the room, I couldn't explain it,
Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah, shit. That was going to be my question as well. You touched on what the coalition is against, but you really didn't touch on what your the benefits are, whether it's just Wilmington residents, Massachusetts, or New England residents, on some of the positives of the proposed pipeline.
Right. I think that we're obviously, I was present at the Kinder Morgan presentation to the Selectmen, and of course their presentation was all positive, upbeat, that it's going to bring tax money to the town, and obviously increased gas availability will hopefully decrease the prices. Again, the coalition's concern is that there's a limited supply of, Kinder Morgan claims there's unlimited supply of gas. Scientists and other people think there's only a limited supply of the gas. It may not last as long as they think it is going to last. And if we start exporting it, it's going to deplete much faster. And the coalition's concern is this is potentially designed for exporting the gas to Canada and overseas, where the price is greater, so they can experience more profit, which is a possibility. If that should happen, the potential that there might be an increase in the cost here as demand overseas is greater than, the global demand is greater than currently here. So there's a possibility that in the future we may experience an increase in gas prices locally. Even though there's more gas going through here, it's not staying here. That's one possible scenario. And the other one is part of the FERC process is a tariff passes the cost of the construction onto the end user, which is the large distribution suppliers for power plants, and then also the thermal energy side, which is the local distributors for home heating and all that. So ultimately, there may be an increase in your gas bill experience because of this tariff that's being proposed to pass on the cost of building this infrastructure, because it's $4 billion or something like that to build this pipeline. So I believe some of the end users and some of the distributors and Kinder Morgan wants some type of a compensation because it's, again, the need and the necessity is to the public interest. So they're saying because it's for the public interest that they should be subsidized to some extent. And that's, I believe, the tariff is being the way they pass that on to the end user. So whether it increases the cost of gas or not, or decreases the cost of gas or not, that's something to be seen, I think, depending on the outcome of the tariff, they call it, which currently has been on hold for 30 days, and that's part of the governor's commission there, that they're studying the need for the pipeline, and then also what will happen with this tariff if they move forward with the pipeline. So that's kind of what I get out of the meetings when I was, again, it's one side. I'm hearing one side from the coalition and one side from Kinder Morgan. So somewhere in the middle is probably the reality of the situation. So trying to provide this side and the other side you've heard, so and you can see online. So it's just information for you to take into account in your decisions to whether to join the coalition or not, or to continue just to monitor the coalition and get information from them. I mean, it's my thoughts.
Anything to my left? Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. Unfortunately, I was not able to attend the meeting in July. The meeting was changed, and I couldn't make it, and I apologize for any ignorance I have here tonight. I mean, is it fact or is it fiction? I can't believe that if they run this pipeline through Massachusetts, we're not going to benefit from it. I mean, I see us definitely going to need more use of power in the future. I mean, it's just common sense. And I would hope to think that if we're going to let them, allow them to move heaven and earth to put this pipeline, but yet, if we're going to benefit from it, Massachusetts and the ratepayers are going to pay less money relative to natural gas, then so be it. I mean, we're hearing something from the coalition. Obviously, they're opposed to it. There's no question about it. But, is it fact or is it fiction? And I would love to get an answer. And like I said, I apologize for any ignorance not being here when Kinder Morgan was here. But simple economics. Is Massachusetts going to benefit from this new pipeline coming through? And if the answer is yes, I'll be honest, I'm all for it. Don't have an issue with that. I don't mind saying it. Because everyone keeps on talking about we need alternative energy, we need this, we need that. Well, if it's going to be as less disruption that it's going to be, then I would look at it. But if we're not going to benefit, I wouldn't be in favor of it. I don't think any politician would be in favor of it if we're not going to benefit economically or the ratepayer is going to benefit. I mean, that's a simple question. I don't know if anyone has that answer. I mean, we're hearing from one side and the other side. I mean, I'm just come from the school of common sense. And if it says we're going to benefit and it's going to help people economically, how come you can't? Why can't you be for it?
I think that from what I'm hearing, we definitely need another source of creating the electricity that we need to have, because Yankee power plant's closing down shortly, and there's a couple of coal power plants right now that are be closing down shortly. And that need is, I think they mentioned that 250 million cubic feet per day is going to be needed of potential gas as an alternative power source to create that electricity that's needed in the future, which is part of the 1 billion cubic feet over the next 20 years that I understand. So I think there's no doubt that something is needed. I mean, that's clear. And the question is it Kinder Morgan, is it Spectra, or is it something else? And I think that's what the coalition is trying to, because Kinder Morgan's, in my opinion, will have some impact on conservation land, farmland, communities all throughout this state, Maine, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, New York. There's a whole bunch of, it's quite an extensive pipeline they're building, and there's going to be a lot of impact environmentally from a new pipeline. If Spectra could be used, at least in our area, to provide the service that we need, or to provide the gas that we need, it's an alternative that should be looked at, where it's going to be using the same corridor that's already existing.
If I can, Madam Chairman, I don't know, like I said, I was not here at that meeting. I don't know if there is an answer here from the manager, or we need to find out. I'm sure they probably said, oh yeah, there's probably is going to be need. I mean, I'm sure if they were here, they're going to say, definitely going to be need in Massachusetts. Why are you going to sell a product if you're not going to be able to use it? Common sense. So I would love to get an answer from a federal agency saying, absolutely, Massachusetts is going to benefit. If they're going to benefit from it, well, why not support it? Really? You know, I mean, if we're not going to benefit, then why would you be in favor of it? You know, I mean, that's as simple as it gets, folks. That's what we need to know. You know, and I don't know if somebody has the answer here. I don't know. And I apologize once again, my ignorance, because I was not here.
Jeff, do you want to make a
Yeah, I would just comment, Selectman McCoy raises a good point in terms of how much of the benefit of this gas will accrue to Wilmington. And I don't have the answer specifically, but I can say, based upon what we learned from the presentation that Kinder Morgan made, they're simply the distributor. So they are paying to construct the pipeline. There are various other entities that ultimately they obtain contracts from to purchase the gas. So the question really becomes whether it's not Boston Gas anymore, but whether the local gas companies that ultimately distribute the gas to homes in Wilmington and in Massachusetts, how many of those companies are actually going to be purchasing gas off this distribution link, if you will, that will benefit Wilmington residents? And that's a question I don't know. I suspect the coalition doesn't know, and I'm not sure at this point whether Kinder Morgan is going to advise us as to who they have contracts with. But if it's simply, it's almost like a highway. If you take the analogy of Interstate 93, it's great if there are exits off Interstate 93 into Wilmington and we can derive some benefit from it. If there's no exits off the pipeline, so to speak, that benefit Wilmington residents, then, you know, it becomes questionable.
Yeah.
Yeah, the pipeline, the way I understand it, the pipeline is going to Wilmington. There'll be no drawing off the pipeline that goes to Wilmington. That will go to the other stations where the large distribution companies will receive the gas and then distribute it through their mechanisms that they have, to their pipelines and their tankers and whatnot that will disperse the gas from there. The other thing that my understanding is that Kinder Morgan, when they proposed their this pipeline, they needed enough contracts with large distribution companies, which are the ones that provide to power companies, essentially. They needed 700 million cubic feet per day to go forward to build this, to make it worth their while, to build this pipeline as a minimum. That's what they had mentioned. They lost a few when the tariff got tabled at its current location. It got tabled by the Governor's Commission. They lost several of their larger contracts. I think they're down to either 400 or 500 million cubic feet per day in contracts. But they're picking that up with the thermal energy side, which is the more local distributors that send it to your house for heating. So between the two, they're going to move forward with their filing on September 15th. When they move forward with the filing, they will fine-tune the actual location through Wilmington. This is a tentative location. So next week, we should be seeing the final maps that show exactly where this is going to go through Wilmington, as well as some more information that they're going to provide when they do the pre-filing.
The state also, Governor Patrick committed to examine the demand too, and he sent out an RFP that I believe they're going to select an expert in the field to examine those energy needs and what the demands are by, I think, October 1st, if I'm correct. Mm-hmm. I apologize. Today was my first meeting with the coalition. I'm trying to just go through all these notes and get myself up to speed, but it sounds like there's a lot of conflicting, well, there's statistics and there's people with different interests that are showing us these numbers that benefit, their cause. Just my initial opinion of it, but.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, guys.
If I may, thank you for attending. I would say, what you wrote, what you typed for us, and what you presented to us tonight, I find tremendously valuable. Like Mr. Newhouse, a lot of the stuff is way over my head, and so I appreciate you sort of breaking it down, at least in terms and language that I can understand. For as long as you are allowed to continue going to those meetings, I would like for Mr. Holt to continue to do that. That's my personal feeling. Right up until it becomes a point where the coalition says, hey, sign here and join us in opposition with this project, or don't come to the meeting anymore. At that point, then I'm not sure where I'd stand. I'm not sure I stand up in opposition to this project. Much like my colleague to my right, Mr. McCoy, I have the strong opinion that you kind of got to play to, you got to pay to play. And what I mean by that is we all use natural resources. We're using them now. We take for granted electricity and heat as just how we live our lives. We don't think about it, and we assume that it will always be there. And while we assume that, there are those of us that will say, well, we don't want to pay the price that it takes to get those resources delivered to us. I think back a couple of centuries ago, we dug trenches and made canals, and that went through people's farms and properties. And then a generation or so later, railroad tracks did the same thing. And then a century later, we had highways blazing through farmlands and neighborhoods, and in the name of progress. And I would dare say that it succeeded, and it improved our quality of life, and it continues to do so. And these pipelines, some of them exist in our area today, and they provide us with the electricity and the warmth that we take for granted. So I think we have to be receptive to the idea that we need to be open to other sources of growth. And if that means we're going to have a pipeline that extends through Wilmington, if it benefits the region and it provides jobs and it decreases the amount of fossil fuels we have to buy from maybe not necessarily particularly friendly countries, and if it means we can export some of our own domestic fossil fuels to countries that want to pay for our natural resources. Those, to me, are big political discussions, but those are generally positive in my mind. I hope that the economics would work out, that it wouldn't actually end up costing us more because of it, and to the contrary would be true. But I'd be supportive of the project overall if what I see, there seems to be minimal potential impact on residential and even private property, and even the impact on the town-owned property seems minimal as well on this particular extension. So I don't see a need for us to take an opposition view. That being said, I really want to stay in the game with the coalition because I feel like we're learning and gathering information. We can use that information and compare it vis-a-vis the information that Kinder Morgan is giving us. So, like you said, hopefully find the truth in the middle. But it's good information. I just think we need to be receptive to what it takes to grow and to continue our lifestyle. That's my opinion on it. Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to also say thank you. All the points that have been made certainly resonate well with me. Looking at this from a big picture, though, just stepping back, I'm hearing about the coalition piece, but do you have a sense, like just from an overall project timeline perspective, from point A to Z, how long it would take for something like this to either come to fruition or to be voted down?
Yep. Sort of. The FERC process is new to me as well, although I'm learning about it each time I go to the meetings. My understanding is when they file next Monday, there will be about a 7-month period of meetings held throughout the course of the path of the proposed pipeline. Won't be in every town, but it will be like in centrally located towns, so that maybe it will be in a few towns, Tewksbury, and in 4 or 5 towns, and go to Tewksbury to the meeting that they're going to hold. I think it's the FERC holds the meetings, I believe, with Kinder Morgan and with the public for input. That will take 7 months, and I believe they have to file the next step, which is what's we call the certification of the permit with FERC within that 7 months. The whole process, my understanding, will take potentially up to 1.5 to 2 years to complete. So they won't have permits in hand to begin construction for about 2 years. I think they even said that their projected construction would be 2017 and 18 or something like that on Kinder Morgan's presentation. So that's probably what looking at is about 1.5 to 2 years of complete the process through the Federal Energy Commission, Regulatory Commission. I don't know that the other permits as well through the towns and the state, DEP and Conservation Commissions. I think there's a few others, MEPA.
Actually, it's NEPA, the national version of NEPA, but FERC doesn't have a procedural time limit to it either. It's not like a state, like MEPA, where they say, all right, you have 30 days. We have 30 days to get back to you on this application. They could hold it in perpetuity. I doubt they would, but with all the influence they're going to probably be getting. But it's just something to, I guess, consider or throw out there. Yeah, Bill was right on. They said a 7-month window where they look at all the environmental impacts, the social impacts that go along with the application, and that's the pre-filing, and then they have to file for their certificate. And I think it's a 2-step. They file a draft EIR, like an environmental impact statement. They'll get comments and they'll get scoped on that, and then they present based on that. They gather that information and submit a final EIR or EIS where you don't get a second chance as a intervener to comment. So once it goes through the DEIS or DEIR process, that's your last crack at it, so to speak.
Okay. Just trying to ensure that Wilmington essentially kind of has their seat at the table. So, you're at the coalition meetings, which is one component, but just the overall as it relates to the state and federal level as to how Wilmington gets notified so that, we're on the front end of this. It seemed like, and I say this respectfully, I heard about it before it came to Wilmington. I heard about it from other towns' perspective, so I think they started there and kind of made their way to us. I think it was more a calendar scheduling thing before they came in as late as they did. But just going forward, just to kind of keep up on the communication so that if we need to weigh in on something, that, we have the ability to do that. It seems like such a vast project, and, I'm trying to keep an open mind, but it's so complex, to Mr. Newhouse's point, understanding the macro and micro of it. But I mean, if it ever came to fruition, I mean, there's traffic issues, there's construction issues, there's, police issues, it's so vast and so complex, and conservation and just it's to your point where you were saying that, if they build the gas line and it has a certain amount that exceeds what they need and they want to export that, I mean, if their profit margins are better to export it, do they have minimum thresholds that they have to retain in this geography to ensure that we benefit from it? So, for example, if it made more sense for them financially to sell off 90% overseas and only leave 10% here, then I wouldn't be in favor of it. But if I had a minimum, threshold that needs to remain here in the region so that we can benefit from it, like a max min not to exceed or et cetera, then that would be something that I would be interested in knowing. If they have no regulation to decide how it's being allocated, I wouldn't want to just give them an open license to run a pipeline without some guarantee that a certain portion of that has to remain here so that we can benefit from it. So I'd be interested in knowing that as well.
Just a couple of comments. I do believe it's advisable for the town to continue to participate in these meetings, and we will continue to do that. I think at this point, we're still going to take the approach of gathering more information before specifically committing to this organization, because as Bill indicates, it does appear squarely to be opposed to the project. One of my concerns at this point is the proposed proximity of this pipeline corridor to the Browns Crossing well field, and I would go so far as to see if there's a representative from Kinder Morgan that we can notify about that proximity, and perhaps find out if they are able to alter that course in some measure, because that certainly as much as the intent presumably is going to be to design it to be fail-safe, we all know that that's not always possible. So that would be certainly an immediate concern.
Yes.
I'd like to echo what Jeff just said about the concern about the well field. I also wasn't here for July. I intended to be, and I apologize that I wasn't. I have a great concern. Anytime you do some kind of a large utility structure like this, you could unearth and disturb systems that are in the environment, that are in equilibrium, and we don't really know what's going to be disturbed. We've already lost 5 wells in town. I think that should be some special consideration for Wilmington as a unique entity, that we're going to be encroaching on 2 of our remaining wells. I think that should buy us a little bit more of a comment or a push at the table not to take that route. I really don't think it would be advisable, in my mind, to mess around with that. If you establish this utility conduit, does that mean at some point, 50 years from now, you could see some kind of liquid petroleum pipe going through there? I don't know. We talked about another pipeline town where they may be able to put a pipeline next to the existing pipeline. By establishing this pipeline, are we opening up the Browns Crossing well field to potentially something else going through there? Those are the kind of questions that I would like to stress, if through the board, to go to these meetings. Wilmington has a unique problem where just 2 of our remaining wells are being impacted here. So I wanted to emphasize that a little bit more if I could. Thank you.
Thank you for that point. Okay, I believe at this point you've heard from everyone on the board. Once again, really do appreciate you being here tonight, and I'm sure we'll be in touch with future communications moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just pause for a quick second before we move into communications. Moving on to communications.
The first communication we have is a memorandum from me that highlights correspondence received from the town of North Reading, and this is with respect to a proposal that they are pursuing to purchase property that the former J.T. Berry property off of 62. There's a portion of that property, approximately 44 acres, that remains undeveloped. It's currently under the jurisdiction of DCAM, the Division of Division of Capital Planning, Maintenance, and Management. And if you recall, a number of years ago, a portion of that property was redeveloped for apartments, and at the moment the town has been in discussions with DCAM through a particular program that is offered by DCAM called Sales Partnership Model, in which the town would be able to purchase the property essentially at a discounted rate, and then the town could market the property and then sell it for development. The premise behind this, and this is a recent model that's been designed, the state is looking to identify properties that they no longer need, that are surplus to their needs, and essentially get the property back into circulation, generate jobs, generate tax revenue. And so that's the premise behind this particular model. I received a call middle of last week from Michael Prisco, who's a member of the Board of Selectmen in North Reading, in addition to the town administrator there, Michael Gilberto. They apologize for the fact that it was a rather late notice in the process, but essentially what their plan is to have a town meeting on October 6th. In fact, they're considering that this evening. And the idea would be to authorize the funding to purchase this remaining property and then potentially develop it for commercial space. There is 3 acres within this area that is actually within the confines of the town of Wilmington. And so that was the basis for their call. They wanted to find out whether the town, what impacts the town felt existed historically when the private, the apartment development was constructed, and essentially whether the town would support including the 3 acres as part of this overall package deal going forward. They are looking for a response by the end of the week, which again is certainly a very short timeline, and I explained to them that we had a meeting this evening, but then would not be meeting again until October 14th. Quite honestly, my recommendation is that the board indicate that we really need to a little bit more time to consider the impacts here. In talking to a couple of representatives from DCAM, they've indicated that they're prepared to go forward with this process without the 3 acres within Wilmington. That typically what happens is the 2 towns would have some negotiation as to whether or not perhaps the town of Wilmington would be interested in the property, or whether they would be amenable to allowing the property to be incorporated into the larger development. So that's essentially where that stands. They being the town of North Reading, is looking for some type of response, if you will, from the board. Again, my recommendation is that the board indicate we need to have more information before a decision on whether to support including the 3 acres with the overall development of this property. I don't have all of the history of what happened previously, although I do know that traffic was one of the concerns previously, and I suspect would be a concern this time around. If it's developed commercially, I would suspect that a lot of that commercial traffic is going to want to access 93, and the way to do that certainly is through 62. So the expectation would be that there would be an impact there. Previously, it's my understanding that the desires of the town were that the property remain open as open space, and in fact, in speaking with one of the representatives at DCAM today, she indicated that that was a condition that was negotiated with the former developer. Gutierrez, I believe, is the former developer, that the town portion, that 3 acres, remain open.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Just to add, I think that based on my recollection, I think Mr. Hull did a pretty thorough job in reviewing where we're at. I did serve as a member of the board as the board's designee to the reuse committee, the J.T. Berry Reuse Committee, so many years ago. I forget when it was, but essentially through that process, and it was a very cumbersome process in terms of establishing the composition of the reuse committee. There were 2 Wilmington representatives, and then the legislative delegation from both towns were ex officio members who, were encouraged to be at meetings but didn't have a vote on the reuse committee. Long and the short of it is the town of Wilmington took the position to try and preserve all of it as open space. That didn't fly. With 2 votes on a 13 to 15 person committee, we couldn't muster any momentum to do a whole lot, although to the credit of the town of North Reading and the members of that reuse committee, they were cognizant of Wilmington's presence and, within reason, tried to make sure we at least had the opportunity to be heard, if nothing else. To me, that process went as well as you could have expected until when the economic climate changed. What had been approved over there was a 100% commercial use, and that's when Mr. Hull refers to Gutierrez, he was a proponent of a 100% commercial development. And that's something that the town of North Reading had been very interested in, is just generating the commercial tax base. What happened when the economic climate changed and the property lay fallow, the town of North Reading took another look at it and explored their alternatives with DCAM, and essentially, without going through that whole public process again, they were allowed to proceed with a proponent to do 50% residential, which is essentially the development that's there now, and reserved the opportunity to do the commercial build-out later. So to me, what's frustrating is the scores of hours, if not hundreds of hours, that people went through for the public process, frankly, when the economic climate changed, was undermined in all of about 3 meetings. And all that work was basically for naught. You fast forward a number of years, and again, we're put on notice of, with all about a week's worth of lead time to try and generate meaningful feedback to a project that initially took years and hundreds of hours to kind of build a consensus and to get everybody's input. So, I don't know how we could possibly be expected to look at things like peak and non-peak car trips per day based on a commercial development today as opposed to, say 1996 or 1997. I'm pretty sure it was that long ago that I sat on that reuse committee. So, I don't direct any ire at the town of North Reading and their officials trying to move forward, doing what they can for their town. But this process is certainly another example of a maddening process where you just, you spend an incredible amount of hours and then overnight it changes and there's not the same kind of public process. So beyond taking Mr. Hull's recommendation that I think we ought to do, I also think that we should at least make our position known that we're simply not given enough time to have meaningful input with the deadlines that have been provided.
I'm in favor of that position. I don't know if anyone else feels compelled to comment.
I'd agree. We're getting it at the 11th hour, so why come up with a decision immediately?
I agree. I have a host of questions, and probably there aren't any answers, which is probably evidence that the right approach is to wait and learn and gather information. We represent 3 acres. To what degree? I mean, are they really just trying to be nice to us? There's 3 acres there. I mean, they can proceed with whatever they want to do, irrespective of whether we like it or not, right? I mean, I don't mean to simplify it.
Yeah, I believe they can. I mean, as a practical matter, they can just go forward and develop the portion that is not in Wilmington, just as a matter of course. I think they are trying to reach out and be reasonable and looking to find out what concerns Wilmington has. They were also asking about what kinds of agreements or commitments DCAM made to the town back at the time of the previous discussions. In fact, the only commitment that I'm aware of at this point is the commitment that the 3 acres remain as open space. They want to honor any commitments that were previously made, so that's where we stand.
And I don't want to undermine those commitments made by folks that came to this long before I did, but I will also ask, with North Reading's intent to develop this abutting land to our 3 acres, is North Reading going to, I imagine that the purpose behind that is to generate tax revenue for the coffers of North Reading. Is there opportunity for us, the town of Wilmington, to leverage the tract of land that we own for the same purpose? In other words, right now it's a big tract of open land that has a border through it. Some is North Reading, some, and a smaller portion is ours, is Wilmington's. Once North Reading develops their tract of land, we've got a reasonably small section of open space. At that point, would it behoove the town of Wilmington to sort of get on board and do something commercially there, or could we somehow allow North Reading to have their development come into ours and have North Reading pay us a stipend or something annually? I don't know how these things kind of work.
Well, that property that is in Wilmington, that whole tract, portion of which is within the confines of Wilmington, is currently owned by the state, so that's part of the DCAM property. It just happens to be that that section is within Wilmington. So the way this would unfold is that the state would, North Reading would purchase the property from DCAM for whatever price is assessed. Then the town would market the property and seek to sell it for as I'm told, commercial purposes. A portion of the proceeds from that sale, 50% at least at the start, would go back to the town, 50 to the state, and then depending upon, there are certain incentives built in, so that if the property is developed or is sold within, I think it's a couple of years, they get an extra 10%. If it's developed within 5 years, it's 5%. So the potential is that depending upon how many of these incentives North Reading takes advantage of, they could receive up to 70% of the proceeds from the sale of the property. But there's one or two tracks that North Reading could take, and I suspect this is one of the reasons why they're looking for input from Wilmington. One tract is to seek to develop the property, purchase the property that's within the confines of North Reading and develop it. The other alternative is to, and I think with Wilmington's blessing, develop the entire parcel, including the 3 acres.
There were, and if I may follow up on that, Madam Chair, I think one of the points that Mr. Shampoo is getting to is that 1996, 97, whenever we went through that process, it made sense for the town at the time to take the position that the portion in Wilmington, which is very small relative to the entire site, remain open space. And I think much of the consideration to that had to do with creating a buffer between that development and the residential neighborhood that's adjacent to it. And there's even some town-owned property and perhaps a well field over there. I lose perspective, and my memory's just not that precise going back. But I think to your point, how do we know it doesn't make sense even to be 2 acres of parking lot that's ancillary to a commercial piece of property? If that were included in the development, we could in fact assess that parcel and generate some tax revenue. So I guess in direct answer to your question, I don't remember, and they're not giving us a whole lot of time to review that. But I do have some comfort that there were specific reasons why we thought it made sense, and that we weren't going to be able to leverage that small piece to generate any appreciable tax revenue, so that it made sense to take the position to remain open space. I guess on such a short time frame, how we revisit that, but that certainly was considered back then.
I'd like to look at it again. Obviously, we don't have the time, but that's
Yeah.
something, you said it better than I was. I was trying to go there, and I didn't know how to get there. I'd like to see what the opportunities are. And, 93 is just, on this map that you provided to us, am I right here that 93 is just off to my right?
Yes.
So going down that road, all right. So is there any kind of a cost sharing on the roadway? Because all of the folks in this development area, the residential folks existing and any potential new commercial development folks, are going to hit 93 through Wilmington, right? We said that a little while ago. And we're effectively on the hook for, I imagine, maintaining the roads and salting and doing all that stuff. Or is that a state state-maintained tract of land there.
That section is town. The town's responsible for.
Do we ever interact with the neighboring towns in circumstances like this to get a little help in that region from North Reading, where they're the ones, it's North Reading residents and occupants who are ultimately using that land, and they're driving over our streets that we're maintaining? I mean, I don't know. Am I being crazy here?
I don't know to what degree there were discussions or any, as far as I know, there were no agreements previously that, that there was any kind of impact benefit, if you will, or impact money that was given to Wilmington as a result of that development. I suppose certainly discussions can take place as to whether that would happen.
It strikes me to be opening a can of worms, right? Because in one case, we're the recipients, or we're taking care of the land, and another, somewhere up the street, we're going to be the ones using the land on someone else's town. So it probably all washes out in the end. Thank you.
So Jeff, you had indicated that DCAM owns it, so it's state-owned, and if North Reading were to purchase it and purchase the 3 acres that are Wilmington, I mean, do we have any enforceability to see that it's open? I mean, if we're just giving them an opinion, which I agree, it's too short notice to do that. I mean, essentially, the only way for us to guarantee what it's used for, would we have to essentially buy the land? I mean, or would it just be in the form of asking them as a friendly neighborly request not to develop it?
I'm not aware of any particular regulation or statutory requirement that we could impose that would bar them from developing it. I mean, ultimately, if the North Reading Town Meeting authorizes this, then North Reading and DCAM have to file special legislation, which they presumably would do in January at the beginning of the legislative session. So whether, if we were opposed to developing that portion, whether we could have our legislative delegation, at least some of whom are, representing us versus North Reading, whether we would go that route to try to keep that from happening. But I'm not aware of any particular requirement that we could that we have that would bar them from developing that. Next under correspondence, we have a letter from Paul Stedman. This is from Mass DOT. He's advising us that they've received the town's proposal to reconstruct Route 38. They're reviewing the project need form and project initiation form, which were the documents, if you recall, that we were talking about a few months ago when Green International presented. So they'll be reviewing that and coming back to us with any comments or questions. Just by way of information, again, this is a very preliminary stage of this process. The first step is to get into the tip cycle, and then if in fact that happens, then there'll be opportunities to first of all develop the plan and certainly comment on how that plan is developed. We have just a notice from the Conservation Commission. This is with respect to the annual town cleanup day, which this year is happening on September 27th. The start time is 8 a.m. It runs from 8 to 12. Meet at the DPW building, 135 Andover Street. And this has been going on now for a number of years. Residents, we greatly appreciate people turning out to assist in terms of trying to pick up litter and debris in some of our more sensitive areas. If there's any questions, please call the Conservation Office at 978-658-8238. The rain date is October 4th. We have correspondence from the Metropolitan Area Planning Council. This again is talking about the election process that's coming up. There are 4 seats representing various constituencies within the MAPC, and it outlines the process for that election. Nomination papers are due Friday, October 3rd. We have correspondence, this is actually board to consider, correspondence from the Recreation Commission, Debbie Cipriani. On behalf of the Recreation Commission, I'm requesting permission from your office and the Board of Selectmen to conduct the 47th Annual Horribles Parade on Sunday, October 26, 2014. Participants will assemble in front of the Public Safety Building at 4:30 p.m. and then proceed up Church Street to the high school cafeteria, where volunteers will present costumed children with holiday treats. We cordially invite you and members of the Board of Selectmen to join the festivities as spectators or volunteers. Volunteers should be at the high school by 4. Last year, we estimated approximately 425 children participated in the festivities. With your support, we look forward to continuing this time-honored event. So they're looking for permission there.
Okay, questions, comments, or a motion for this request?
Move to grant the request?
Second.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you.
We have correspondence from Kathleen Black Reynolds, Chair of the Historical Commission. Similar request was made last year to authorize the use of the Swain parking area for an old-fashioned car show. This is slated to occur in conjunction with the farmers market, and it would be scheduled for September 14th between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. She notes last year's event was very well attended. The cars will be on display in the rear portion of the parking lot, thereby leaving the side parking lot open and available for general parking. So they're looking for permission to do that. The rain date would be September 21st.
Okay, questions, comments, or motion for this request?
I'll make the motion to approve the use of the Swain parking lot for the Classic Car Show on the date September 14th.
Second.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you.
And we have two requests for approval of licenses to sell Christmas trees, one from the Boy Scouts Troop 56 and the other from the Wilmington Methodist Church. Have recommendations both from the police chief. Sees no problem with either request. Similarly, the building inspector sees no issues with respect to zoning.
Okay, hearing that, questions, comments, or motion?
Move that we grant the request as described by the town manager.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you.
One recommendation from the town clerk for approval of an additional election worker. This is for the primary that will be occurring tomorrow. Sumner A. Beals is the recommended individual.
Okay. Questions, comments, or a motion, please?
Move to approve Summer Beals as an election worker.
Okay, motion's been made. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you.
And we have a request from Christine Stokes. This is to conduct a block party on Jacob Street. Similar request was made for a date in August due to unforeseen circumstances. They had to cancel that event, and they're now asking for permission to conduct the block party on Saturday, September 20th. Party is planned for 2 p.m. until 8 p.m. I've checked with the police chief. He has no issues.
Okay. Questions, comments, or a motion on this request?
Move to grant the request?
Motion's been made. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. Okay, moving on to public comments. Yes.
I'd like to ask a question before I could. I've already asked the town hall, and they don't seem to have an answer. Why is it that the town requires a home business to have a doing business permit if you're in compliance with the zoning bylaws, but if you're not in compliance with the zoning bylaws, you don't have to have a doing business permit and the town won't stop your business? I'd like to know what the story is on that.
I guess you need to offer some specifics. What specifically are...
For one, the landscaping, a contractor's yard is being operated in the property behind mine. There's a commercial truck and a tree service to, through the woods. And there's a commercial bus that's parked next door that belongs to a commercial entity. And I've complained multiple times to the town. None of these operations have a doing business permit, and they're all in multiple violations of the zoning law as far as I can see. And I've copied yourself several times. I've sent several written complaints to the building inspector, and I get no response from him. And I've actually corresponded with the town clerk, and I got a response back from her late last year that one of the entities was making arrangements to make other arrangements, and here it is 9 months later, and they're still doing the same thing. So I'm just curious why that is, that I have to have a doing business permit for my little one-man office environmental consultant business, but people can run a contractor's yard with trucks running in and out, building non-conforming commercial structures, and submit a letter stamped by a PE that says they're going to store the equipment in the shed. My understanding is the zoning bylaws say you can have 3 garages, 3 garage ports. But you already can have 2 garage ports in a house and build a 4-bay structure and submit a letter from a PE saying it's to store your commercial vehicles. I don't really understand what the deal is in that. I'd appreciate it if someone could explain it to me.
I'll defer to the manager on this, but this is the first I'm hearing of it. I'll give you an opportunity to respond, Jeff, of course.
Yeah, you have multiple issues, complaints before the building inspector, and some of them, as much as you have claimed that there are certain businesses going on, the fact remains it's not clear that that's the case. And, well, you certainly, if you presume, know your options if you believe that there are businesses that are being conducted that, and we haven't responded to them, so...
Just wait for it, it's coming.
Okay.
Thank you. I just wanted to be clear that the town knew that was happening. So before
Well,
the
you're making allegations about businesses that are operating, and what I'm telling you, George, is that it's...
Photographs are pretty powerful evidence, I think. You know,
Mr. Lamfield, give him an opportunity.
I'm sorry.
In the middle of speaking.
Yeah.
The information that you've provided a number of pictures. I don't believe in the end that at least some of that information has established that there are businesses operating there. So, the response to your question, I guess, is that when there are businesses that are in particular areas, they're required to have a business certificate. And as you know, this has been a long-standing dispute as to whether there are businesses operating there or not. If, in the estimation of the town at this point, they aren't businesses, so they don't require a business certificate.
And they can park vehicles that don't comply with the zoning bylaw, and that's okay too. And they can build the structure that I actually won my appeal with the Building Code of Appeals Board, and that unsafe structure had massive upgrades to it. And as part of that requirement from the Building Code of Appeals Board, they had to have an intended use letter. So I have a PE letter that says it's to store the vehicles for the commercial business. It says this to store all these things, and that's just boggles my mind that the town doesn't, so that's my option, is to go to court. But I have other issues that I'm not speaking about here, but that's a pretty obvious one. And I just don't understand how that doesn't...
Well,
okay.
I'm not going to, there are certainly other issues that are involved here, but I'm not going to use this forum to go into them.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. New business committee reports. I'll start to my left.
No committee report. I just wanted to, I'll use this pulpit, for lack of a better word. Jeff's going to go through important dates in a minute, but I wanted to specifically take an opportunity to speak to the town about the half marathon, the Chamber of Commerce on September 28th. So I'm pitching it a little bit. It's going to be a beautiful day. It starts down at in front of WCTV. Again, it's scheduled for, what did I just say, the 28th. And it's a half marathon, and it's a 5K walk for those who aren't inclined towards marathoning. A couple of really big surprises that will be part of that this year, and so everyone will want to participate in that. And summer is over, and I know that because we voted to authorize Christmas tree sales today, so I lament that. Anyway, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm good, Madam Chair.
Okay. Anything over here?
Good.
Just one item by way of follow-up. As folks in the general public are aware to some extent, and as the board will remember, we had asked the manager to send a letter requesting certain documentation from Investment in Youth Foundation, and we got a response, I think it was in last week's package, the weeks kind of run together here, which essentially said, please direct future correspondence or communication to their attorney, which I thought was interesting. But have you had occasion to, exchange any communication, whether it's telephone? What's the update with that? Do we have any response?
Yes, I have spoken with the council representing Investment in Youth Foundations. Natalie Hoppel is the attorney representing them, and she has suggested that the town needs to provide specific citations that identify what basis we have for seeking this information.
Madam Chair, just to touch upon, you're talking about the rink, right?
Well, no, the nonprofit that used to run the rink but then changed its mission and since 2005 hasn't been involved in operating the rink, apparently.
Just to echo what you're saying, I had several customers come into my restaurant and say, keep on going, you guys are right on. Several people asked me, can I speak to you for a moment? You guys are dead right, just keep on going. Just I thought I'd mention it. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I presume that we're going to be able to cite those specific, give the attorney's office what they're looking for so that we can get those reports?
Yeah, we'll look at the specifics in terms of the documents that are required, that they are required to provide.
So in terms of new committee reports, I know the manager's going to go over important dates, but I just want to accentuate the Entile Farm dates of September 9th, which is our committee meeting tomorrow night at the Memorial Library in the Bander Room, and also the Entile Farm Workshop, which is October 9th. That is really going to be the October 9th date of the last public forum before we really get further on in design. So just want to let residents know that October 9th date is at the Wilmington Middle School cafeteria at 7 p.m. on October 9th, and that's going to be one of the last stops in terms of the public process to garner any feedback about the design. So I'd certainly stress the importance of that date if people want to take an active role in giving your feedback. Thank you. On to important dates, Jeff, please.
The farmers markets continue, Town Common parking lot, 10:30 a.m. to 11:30 p.m. through October 12th. As I previously noted, the state primary is tomorrow. Polls open at 7 a.m. and will close at 8 p.m. The Yentile Farm Development Committee is noted tomorrow at the library, Bander Room, 6 p.m. Next Board of Selectmen's meeting is the 22nd of September, Room 9 at 7 p.m. The 27th of September is the annual cleanup. As previously noted, meet at DPW 135 Andover Street, 8 a.m. to 12 noon. September 28th, the Wilmington's 10th annual half-marathon 5K run or walk. The October 9th, again, there's the Entile Farm Workshop, Wilmington Middle School cafeteria, 7 p.m. And I would just add one other date that just came in late this afternoon. As probably many of you are aware, October is Fire Safety Month, and the fire chief has advised that there will be an open house at the Public Safety Building. The details are still being worked on, and will be information going out about that, but that'll be October 11th. I would also like to mention one other item. We had over the weekend, Saturday evening, a microburst that came through the area, and Public Works personnel were out Saturday evening clearing brush and debris off of some of the roads. Some of the areas that were impacted, Hathaway Acres, some areas off of Park Street, Freeport, Sparhawk, Heather, Lucaya. Some of those areas were impacted with brush coming down. We have noticed that people have been certainly cleaning up that brush and pulling it to the curb. The town will not be picking up that brush at the curb, but we will be providing 2 dates for drop-off of material at the recycling center. One of those dates is Wednesday, September 17th from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m., and the other date is Saturday, September 20th from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. So again, we know that there are some affected homes in that area. You're encouraged to bring the brush to the drop-off center on those dates because the town will not be doing a curbside collection of that brush.
Okay, thank you. At this time, I'd entertain a motion to enter into executive session for the purpose of discussing real property issues. Since discussing the subject in open session would compromise the purpose for which the executive session is being called, and further that upon the conclusion of the executive session, the board will adjourn. Do I have a motion to that effect? Motion's been made. Do I have a second?
Second?
Okay, at this time, I will take a roll call vote, starting on my right.
Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you.